That should be cease, C-E-S, C-E-A-S-E, not seize. That was my only kind of administrative
Typo,
note. And then we're happy to answer any questions. We have staff here that can answer questions if there are questions that I cannot answer.
Okay. So, let's see, we'll start with Commissioner Walls, since she indicated earlier that she had some thoughts on some of these.
Thank you. First, could I ask just a general question, and I think this is to Kurt. Are all hatchery fish marked on the Columbia? That's just a background question.
Chair Finley and Commissioner Wall, no, not all hatchery fish are marked. I will say that in the Columbia Basin, the vast majority of hatchery fish are marked. There's a couple things at play. There are some programs that do not receive the mass marking, the adipose fin clip, for management purposes. And then there's always quality.
With a process question, if we wanted to have a motion or direction to the department about thermal refuges, what's the process to get that on the table? Because other than pulling some of these off and attempting to make it where they don't exactly fit in the temporary rules.
Well, I think Chair Finley and Commissioner Wall, yeah, you're right. You don't want to change any. Technically, you can't change any of these rules. You could decide not to ratify some of them. The process is, and I think Commissioner Buckmaster alluded to it earlier, as did Chair Finley. That is, there's been direction to the director to implement thermal refugia, for instance, at the mouth of the Deschutes. So you could do that in the form of direction to me. You also, and I think as Mr. Moskowitz mentioned, you do have the angling regulations open this afternoon. You will be doing rulemaking on angling regulations. So if there was a desire, you could adopt rules on the fly. I would, having that not been part of a public process or public discussion, I think it would be, well, it may be legal. I would advise you that we should have a little bit more public process associated with permanent rulemaking than just doing it on the fly this afternoon. But the rules are open. Or maybe it's not even this afternoon, maybe it's this morning. So I don't know if you want anything.
To be sure on that, we'd want to look at the rulemaking notice, if you did want to take any action, make sure that it was noticed properly, broadly.
So the advice is the better thing to do today is create the direction and look again at the permanent rule later.
I think so, yeah.
That's because we want to be in compliance with the Administrative Procedures Act.
Okay.
Any
Then-
other thoughts?
Well, my thought is, and I appreciate, and we heard a little bit about trying to protect these fish and the retention stuff that's already in place. I think, though, that because the numbers are so low and the impacts are coming at us so fast, that we do need to ask the director to look at thermal refuges and kick this up some. I have a question on the Umpqua one, whether it's actually enough of the area covered, but more directly to the Columbia, if we were able to look at adding something that protects the confluences of each of the tribs, at least on our side, and maybe recommend to Washington that they look at it as well, that would be important to do.
Well, we did ask him to emphasize what we had generally asked him to do, but kick it up for the statewide criteria and closure. So do you feel you need any more? You've heard the conversations, you've heard the concern.
Mr. Chair, we're going to go with, work with staff on any potential or any new thermal refugia through temporary rule for this summer. I think, and we can talk about it under angling regulations, which may
Okay.
be more appropriate, but I know Tucker Jones is here and he can talk to you about the closures that are in place already, either actually implemented already or will be implemented through the Columbia River Compact action, so.
Okay. All right. Mary, does that satisfy you?
Can somebody say in a couple sentences exactly what is going to happen next? Just so I know, what did we just do?
The director is going to use the existing authority provided by the commission to implement temporary rules as needed for those cases where populations of fish may be at risk due to high temperatures or stressed by angling during high water temperatures or other concerns related to heat, correct?
Yeah, and I think I would add just, and Mr. Moskowitz mentioned this during public forum, that there really, on the Oregon side of the river, there are really only 2 thermal refuges in the upriver, in the reservoir areas. That's the mouth of Herman Creek as well as the mouth of the Deschutes. The mouth of Herman Creek there's literally in the lagoon there, which is the cold water refuge, there's, I want to say, about 15 tribal set net sites, as well as a ADA fishing facility. And so last year, we did not implement a thermal refuge there because it just didn't make sense. The mouth of the Deschutes is therefore our only real main thermal refuge on the Oregon side.
Well, to some extent, it seems like we're trying to address problems for fish with just a corner of the scope of the problem, and that must be very frustrating to staff who I know are paying a lot of attention to this and trying to find ways to increase the survival, but I think we have to look at this one, so I appreciate you adding it to your table.
Okay. Commissioner Lappard.
So that's exactly what I wanted to hear from staff. I needed to hear the viewpoint from staff on this. So it's not that I was in favor or not a favor of this thermal refuge, but I needed to hear what staff's perspective was as it relates to that. So thank you, Director, for providing that input, and I feel more comfortable now. So I just, in a way of background, I spent 12 years as a county commissioner, and we would always have people come up in public comment to us and say, we need to do this or this or this. And we would always, and I know it's different here, but we would always say, thank you very much for your input. We want to make sure we have all the viewpoints heard. And so we would always ask staff if it was a land use issue or a road issue or whatever to give a viewpoint so that at least the commission, if they're giving direction, would have a broader perspective rather than just one viewpoint. I don't necessarily agree or disagree with Mr. Moskowitz, but I just believe that we need to hear all viewpoints in order to make a decision. And so I appreciate the director giving that perspective on this thermal refuge discussion. So thank you.
Well, as a new commissioner, this issue's been on the table before and we've been given directions.
But it's new to me.
I know it is, so I understand why you're reluctant. And now you understand why we're not reluctant. Okay. Any other comments on the rules before I take a motion from Commissioner Buckmaster?
Yes. If we want to say anything about any of these temporary rules, should we say it now rather than after you make your motion, or?
We can do it either way. We're discussing right now, after the motion is made and seconded, we'll have another opportunity to discuss. But let's hear what you're thinking.
What I'm thinking is on the sage grouse one, there is if I read the staff description right, there's a 25% reduction in population. So that raises a red flag. I think that we should pass this rule, or accept the temporary rule, but it does raise a big red flag if we have a 25% from one year to the next decrease in the spring population.
Would you like to respond to that?
Sure, Chair Finley and Commissioner Wall. I think it's interesting, and maybe, I don't know if it's described here in this rule description, but we had a prolonged winter, and so there's some indication that perhaps it's just survey error, if you will, or inefficiency. I'd also point out that sage grouse populations, they fluctuate. They're one sage grouse biologist has always reminded me that everything eats sage grouse. And so they do fluctuate wildly, dramatically. Interestingly, but across the West, in the entire range, sage grouse range, all states reported a 15 to 40% decline in their spring survey abundance this year. And that also is pretty common, that the population across its range ebbs and flows.
Well, I appreciate that the department keeps it within 3 to 5 instead of going up to the 10%, which is great, and I think that helps. I think this is one that we have to watch really carefully. As I said, I'm ready to vote for this
Yeah.
one and leave it in, but I think it's alarming that we have that kind of a population decrease.
Mr. Chair.
Okay? Commissioner
Welcome.
Lappard.
Yeah, oh,
Thank you, Commissioner Wall. That was almost the exact wording I was going to use, but I'll change it just a little. I'm not going to vote against it. I'm going to support it. I'll tell you that right up front. But it just seems counterintuitive to me that we've got a threatened and endangered species, and we're out there shooting them. And we're shooting 2 birds, and we're allowing it to happen. And so what I'm going to need is some of the wildlife staff to help educate me, because I understand that part of the reason, the major reason is that the wings that are harvested provide excellent research information. And so we're using is it pronounced leek? LEC, excuse me, LEC. The LEC surveys go up and down and those kind of things, but you know, when it's a significant decrease that I saw, and yet there's a huge amount of social pressure to restore these magnificent birds on the landscape, and there's all kinds of reasons for why that I think, you know, I was thinking, God, it's just counterintuitive that we're out there killing them. And so I'm going to need some help. I'll support it
Mr.
because I think it's on the conservative side of that. But
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mr. Chair and Commissioner Lappard, I think first, we actually have a backgrounder on this very issue. It's a common thing that we hear at the state capitol, and also I think from commissioners over the years. First, I'd remind you that they're not actually a listed species.
Oh, they're not. Okay,
They're not a listed
T&E?
species. They're not T&E.
Ah,
When we worked very hard,
Oh, that's
Oregon
right, the
worked very hard
sage-grouse.
to make sure that they were not.
thank you for the clarification.
I would also add that I'm sorry, I got words coming in one ear, and I'm trying to organize my thoughts here. We essentially manage our sage grouse and do all of our sage grouse population work. We've been doing it since the late 1940s, long before they were ever considered a species of concern. And we do that work with license dollars. We do that work with not just hunting license dollars, but also upland game bird license dollars. And we have had a general approach that we would not use those dollars on species that were not hunted. We use, the management is funded by hunting license dollars. Hunting is a legitimate use, just like fishing is a legitimate use for fish, and we do fish actually on, in some cases, listed species. So we've got a backgrounder. I don't even think it has to be updated. We can provide you with that talks about sage grouse hunting.
Mr. Chair,
I used to ask that same question.
I was only going to say that this is a deja vu. I asked the question, before I asked the question, the chair asked the question, you use the word counterintuitive. If I were being a little snarky, I'd look at the director and say, that seems ironic. But I'm not going to do that. But this is going to probably have to be explained to every new commissioner going forward when they bring up hunting on sage grouse. And so I'm confident that you will see the same thing that we all saw, that we are actually, I'm only able to reconcile it in my own head by saying I am authorizing a research tool. And enlisting support from volunteers to do the necessary research. If I found out that that wasn't true, I wouldn't be able to support it.
Okay, we have you
I got it, I
seen
just
You're
got it, yeah.
comfortable with that? Okay, so we have a new 24. There's 23 in your tan folder plus 24.
Does this eliminate one of the 23?
Number 23 on your tan agenda.
Okay, so there's still 23. This is
So this is an
amended.
amended number 23.
Okay.
Okay, you ready for it?
Mhm.
Mr. Chair, I move that the commission adopts temporary rule 1 through 22 plus amended temporary rule 23 as outlined in the tan sheet of, of Friday, August 2nd.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buckmaster and seconded by Commissioner Labhart. Any other final thoughts? Okay.
I have a
All in-
question.
Will you
What
wait
does
1
this,
second, please?
what's this do?
I'm sure they need to do this in original 23.
I don't know if this is replacing.
Mr. Chair, go ahead, you can go ahead and do that, but we may also need to do number 23. I just want to clarify that before we leave
Well,
here.
I
So
can ask Bruce to withdraw
Do
his.
you want me to change the motion 1 through 23?
I just want to clarify before you're done that we actually, whether we need the original 23 in.
Plus
or-
the amendment?
Yes. We're sure? Okay, okay, so you're good. You're good to go, your motion's fine.
Okay, the motion is fine. Okay,
What's 24 do?
There is no 24 now.
This is actually
The new
amended
23,
23.
That's the new
what's it,
23.
what's it do compared to what 23 did?
Yeah.
I guess I will look to the fish division to tell us that.
It appears to be more comprehensive than just the fly fishing zone only.
Expands it beyond just the fly fishing
So it goes further up.
It looks like it to me.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All indicate, those in favor indicate by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously by the 5 commissioners present. Okay,
Mr. Chair, that concludes the director's report.
okay. Thank you, Director, and thanks to staff for everything. We're going to move on now to the minutes, to approve the minutes of June 6th and 7th.
Motion?
Yeah, please.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the commission meetings, the commission minutes for the June 6th, June 7th, 2019 commission meeting as provided by staff.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buckmaster and seconded by Commissioner Sprelbrink. Question, comment?
Yes, and I don't want to be Holly Atkinson, but there are some changes that need to happen in here. On page 5, line 32, amend is listed twice in there, so you possibly change that typo. And then on page 3, line 46, it doesn't make sense. Not that Commissioner Buckmaster made the motion, but it says Commissioner Buckmaster moved to ratify the 5 temporary rules set forth in today's TAN agenda, T-A-N. So I'm not sure what, you probably need to fix that typo. I'm not sure what the wording is there. So I would propose that as an amendment to,
This is the TAN agenda.
oh, okay, so TAN agenda. Okay, I got it now. So,
okay.
so we'll
Color.
always- Color TAN, okay. So at least the one typo there on page 5.
Yeah.
So I would make it.
And what we've always done is, when we approve these temporary rules, they're subject to grammar and spelling. We just approve it, given that if they find a misspelled word or something, that did not change the intent.
So I always thought Commissioner Atkinson would give you the,
Yeah, no.
She would often.
Okay, thank you.
So
We have a second.
we have a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, aye. It's approved unanimously by the 5 commissioners present.
Can I make a comment to the new commissioners on minutes?
Yeah.
Checking with staff, our commission meetings are recorded.
Yes, they are.
So there is always an accurate record of exactly what was said. So if we have that as a backup, we're still approving minutes. Some agencies, some commissions, some boards will refer to the recording. We still do a written one, but know full well that there is a complete backup of the entire meeting.
You think we can do it in 15 minutes? Yeah. Okay. All right, Exhibit B. Preference point reset for resident disabled veterans license holders. Kevin Blakely. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Chair, Commissioners, Director Meltzer. For the record, Kevin Blakely, Deputy Administrator for the Wildlife Division. Today I'll be presenting a recommendation for your consideration regarding preference point reset for disabled veteran license holders. The short presentation will include an overview of the current process for Pioneer license holders regarding preference points, a short summary of recent legislation, and then the staff recommendation for the rulemaking. Current controlled hunt draw processes includes a modified preference point system with a legislative direction overall to provide reasonable assurance of success through time. That is balanced in the Oregon system with 25% of the tags being entirely a random opportunity for all the applicants. In the 2009 legislative session, to modify the preference point system, it was modified to direct the commission to consider giving additional preference points for Pioneer license holders. The commission did in fact pass that rulemaking for Pioneer license holders to reset back to 1 point rather than the standard methodology when you are successful on your first choice to go back to 0. And if you are successful, basically you lose all your points, start back at 0, and start accumulating preference points in future draws. Pioneers at that point start over at 1. So they're always staying 1 point ahead. Any applicant who's unsuccessful, like I said, they're awarded that preference point for the next year's draw. As we have seen in previous public forum discussions and other rulemaking directed through the legislative action, preference points are a highly coveted topic and of conversation, and a real sensitive topic both for how it's earned and disbursement of those preference points. As a baseline kind of for today's rulemaking, I want to give you just a real quick overview for Pioneer license qualifications and description for that. To qualify for a Pioneer license, you have to be at least 65 years of age and having had 50 years of residency in the state of Oregon. And with that, you qualify for a Pioneer license. It's a $6 combination license, hunting and fishing combination, and it has an opportunity for a discounted elk tag and that advantage of the 1 point reset when you are successful at drawing your first choice in any hunt series. So be that buck deer, 100 series, 600 antlerless deer, or 200, say for elk. For the past 3 years, the department has issued on average over 57,000 Pioneer licenses on an annual basis. During this year's legislative assembly, Senate Bill 593 was passed and very simply directed the commission to consider giving that same ability for persons who have been issued a resident disabled veteran hunting license. So the same preference point consideration in the same language that it does for Pioneers. Again, the language in the bill is for the commission to consider awarding those preference points in our controlled hunt permit system. Comparing disabled veteran licenses to the Pioneer licenses for qualifications and description, Disabled veteran licenses are for individuals who have a service disability rating of at least 25%. There's no age requirement for that combination license or length of residency in Oregon. They just have to be a resident of Oregon. And that is for a free combination license for hunting and fishing, and also has that discounted elk tag opportunity. For the past 3 years, in comparison to the Pioneer licenses, Department on average issues almost 17,000 Pioneer, a resident disabled veteran licenses. Currently, they do not receive that 1-point reset though, and that was the entire intent of that legislation. During discussion at legislature by the bill proponents along with the legislators themselves, there was clear intention that that process for the commission to consider and criteria for adding those additional or that additional preference point should be the same as for Pioneer license holders. So even though there's no age criteria for a disabled veteran combination license, in their mind and in that discussion, it was that it should have that same criteria overlay for the 1-point reset. They also discussed about that benefit for the 1-point reset would not be additive. So if an individual was both a Pioneer and a disabled veteran, that would not be an accumulation of to a 2-point reset. So with the direction from Senate Bill 593, which requires, again, the commission to consider giving persons who have been issued a resident disabled veteran hunting license that additional preference point in the control hunt permit process, it's our recommendation to provide that 1-point reset for the disabled veteran license and the same overlay that we do for our Pioneers at the age of 65. And with that also in the rule is drafted that the reset point will remain at 1 even if that individual did qualify both as a Pioneer and a disabled veteran of 65 years of age. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or redirect after.
Kevin, stay right there. We have 2 people signed up for public comment, and I'll call you up and ask you to sit next to Kevin, Ron Yort, and Craig Starr. Thanks for coming, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You each have 3 minutes. When the red light comes on, please finish. Okay, let's start with you, Mr. Yort.
Okay, my name is Ron Yort. I live in Oakland, Oregon. I don't have much to say. I think I talked to you folks in June and brought a letter at that time. All I can say is I'm here to support what I had asked for you to do before, and I appreciate Kevin and his presentation. I think he captured everything. I really thank you, and it's really a privilege to be here and speak to you about this today, and I thank you for that.
Well, thanks for coming. Mr. Starr.
Chair Finley, Commissioners, Director Melcher, my name's Craig Starr and I live in Lebanon, and basically I'm here to provide moral support to Ron and to encourage you to approve the recommendation of the staff in the matter of preference points for disabled veterans.
Okay. Commissioners, Commissioner Labar.
Thank you. I want to look both of you in the eye and thank you for your service. I want to thank you for bringing this forward to the legislature. I want to thank you for bringing this forward to the commission. You didn't make the ultimate sacrifice, but for those who are a disabled veterans, you made a hell of a sacrifice. And I'm very proud to be able to strongly support this. And Kevin, thank you for the staff work on putting this together. I think this is the least we can do for veterans like you that go that extra mile, so appreciate that this coming before us.
Thank you very much.
Chair Finley, I want to make it clear that I'm not a veteran and not a disabled
You're a
veteran.
supporter.
But in elk camp, it's hard to have a lot of privacy, and I can tell you that Ron gave more than his fair share for our nation and his service, so.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Any other thoughts or comments? Do I hear a motion?
So, Mr. Chair, I would move that we amend modified preference point system rules to give an additional point to residents, disabled